the shadowed forests of the mist-covered mountains, there lived a creature older than time itself, an ageless werewolf named Rhiannon. His name, passed down through the ages, was whispered in fear and awe, yet none truly understood the weight of his eternal existence. His soul was bound to the moon, cursed by a forgotten god who had bestowed upon him both strength and sorrow. While Rhiannon's appearance changed over centuries, his face shifting with the seasons, his body maturing, his essence remained untouched by the ravages of time. He was the last of his kind, his pack long gone, their howls silenced by the march of history. Rhiannon's life had become a hollow routine of wandering. He roamed the forests, mountains, and valleys, always careful to avoid human settlements. The world around him had changed, yet he remained a ghost, a relic of an era that had slipped through the cracks of time. He had seen countless kingdoms rise and fall, nations born and destroyed, and civilizations crumble under their own weight. Yet nothing held his attention as deeply as the one thing he had learned to avoid: love. For centuries, Rhiannon had learned the bitter truth. Love was fleeting, like a flame that could never burn long enough to give warmth. His past was riddled with faces, women whose names had been whispered in the wind, only for their lives to flicker out in the span of a mortal lifetime. Every love he had known had been torn from him by the cruel grip of time, leaving only scars and aching memories. It was a cycle that had broken his heart over and over again. His curse was not just immortality, it was the solitude that came with it. But in a village nestled at the edge of the forest, far from the reach of Rhiannon's wandering, a woman named Elowen lived. A woman whose beauty was as radiant as the moon's glow, but whose heart bore a sadness of its own. Elowen was unlike anyone Rhiannon had ever seen. She was a healer, known for her kindness and wisdom, with dark flowing hair that shone like midnight and eyes that reflected the world in hues of violet and indigo. Yet behind her, beauty lay a deep, aching sorrow. Elowen had lost her family to a plague that had ravaged the village years before. Since then, she had lived in quiet isolation, tending to the sick and comforting those who had been left behind. Though the villagers loved her for her generosity, they could not understand the profound grief that colored her every action. Rhiannon first saw her on a moonlit night, when he had wandered closer to the village than he ever dared before. Drawn to the faintest flicker of light coming from a small cottage, he peered through the trees, his heart inexplicably heavy. Inside, he saw Elowen tending to an injured man, her hands moving with gentle care, her face serene yet sorrowful. Her beauty was ethereal, but it was the sadness in her eyes that haunted him, a reflection of his own pain. Over the next few weeks, Rhiannon found himself returning to the village, watching from the shadows as Elowen went about her life. He saw how she smiled for the villagers, but it was always tempered with a quiet grief. There was something in her that called to him, a connection that transcended the distance of their worlds. And yet, Rhiannon could not allow himself to draw closer. He knew the dangers of love all too well. For someone like him, who lived between two worlds, love was not only a fleeting joy, it was a curse in itself. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. One evening, as Elowen walked along the edge of the forest, gathering herbs for her healing work, she stumbled upon Rhiannon. He stood in the shadows, his wolfish form half hidden by the trees. His glowing amber eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, time seemed to stand still. Elowen froze, her breath catching in her throat. There was something about him, something ancient and primal, that stirred a mix of awe and fear within her. She had heard the legends of the wolf who haunted the forest, the ageless beast who could never die, but she never imagined she would meet him face to face. "Are you real?" she whispered, her voice trembling, yet not in fear. It was as if she sensed the sorrow within him, the same kind of sorrow that lived in her own heart. Rhiannon hesitated. "I am as real as the moon's reflection in the water," he replied, his voice low and smooth, like the sound of wind through the trees. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood, gazing at one another, bound by an unspoken understanding. Rhiannon's heart, which had long been cold, felt something stir within it, a flicker of warmth, but he quickly pushed it away. "She is mortal," he reminded himself. "She cannot be mine." But Elowen, in her quiet strength, took a step forward. "You are alone," she said, her voice soft. "I can see it in your eyes. So am I." The words pierced Rhiannon's heart. He wanted to turn away, to leave her and retreat into the shadows of his endless solitude. But instead, he found himself speaking words he had not meant to utter. "Do not come near me, Elowen. I will bring you nothing but pain." But Elowen only shook her head, her expression unwavering. "I have known pain all my life. I think I can bear yours." And so, against all reason, they found each other. They spent weeks together, days in which Rhiannon showed Elowen the hidden beauty of the world, the magic of the forest, the ancient power that coursed through his veins. She, in turn, taught him the warmth of human touch, the comfort of a heart that beat with love despite the sorrow it carried. But as the seasons passed, the tragic truth of their love became unavoidable. Rhiannon, though ageless, could not escape the curse that had haunted him for centuries. Love was fleeting and death was inevitable. For her. One fateful evening, as the full moon rose high above the mountains, Elowen fell ill, stricken by a mysterious fever. Rhiannon stayed by her side, helpless, unable to do anything but watch her struggle. He knew, deep in his heart, that she would not survive. The curse of immortality, which had kept him alive for centuries, was now condemning him to live on without her. On her deathbed, Elowen grasped his hand with the last of her strength. "Don't let go," she whispered. "Promise me, you will not let go." Rhiannon's heart shattered. The very thing he had feared most had come true. "She is leaving me. She will be gone in the blink of an eye." "I promise," he whispered back, though his voice cracked with grief. Elowen's eyes fluttered shut, and the breath left her body. Rhiannon remained by her side long after she was gone, his heart heavy with a pain that was unlike anything he had ever known. He had lived for centuries, seen countless lives come and go, but nothing had prepared him for the loss of Elowen, the woman who had briefly lit up his dark, immortal world. Her death was not the end of his pain. It was the beginning of an eternity without her. As the moon hung high in the sky, Rhiannon howled, his voice rising through the mountains. It was a cry of sorrow, of love lost, of the weight of an eternal curse. And as he wandered once again through the forests, the echoes of his howl faded into the silence, a reminder of the heartbreaking beauty of a love that had never been meant to last.